Okay, so let's just jump right in. You're probably here because, well, you want the deep understanding without maybe reading stacks of papers, right?
Right. A shortcut to getting your head around something really fundamental. Energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking, high school physics here, are we? Force times distance, that sort of thing?
No, definitely not. The sources we've dug into for this deep dive, they approach energy from a really fascinating, almost broader perspective. It's more than just motion.
So our mission today, basically, is to unpack these different ways of looking at energy, see how they actually, work in real life. Daily stuff, work life.
Sort of understanding the hidden current running underneath it all.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And what jumps out immediately from the material is just how varied the definitions are. Physics talks about capacity for work.
Yeah.
Biology might focus more on, vitality, the spark of life. But the common thread, the thing our sources really zero in on, is this idea of potential. Untapped potential within any single thing.
Okay, potential within a single thing. The source is called a unity, right?
Yeah, unity could be a person, could be a team, a company, even a single cell. The principle is the same.
And these unities, they take in energy, store it.
Store it, use it, and crucially transmit it too. And nothing exists alone, right? It's all about the interaction, the back and forth between these unities.
This constant exchange.
Exactly. And the sources actually categorize these exchanges, which is quite useful. Think of 3 types.
Okay.
First, there's non-reciprocally exposed, like sitting in the sun. You're getting energy, but you're not really changing the sun by sitting there.
Right. Makes sense. Receiving only.
Then there's non-reciprocally emitting. Think of a radio station's transmitter tower. It's just pushing energy out. It doesn't really receive specific feedback from every radio tuned in.
Sending a link on it.
And the third one is probably the most obvious, reciprocally interacting. That's a two-way street, like us talking right now.
Yeah.
Energy flows both ways.
Okay, but here's something I found really interesting in the material. Even those one-way flows, like the sunbathing example, they still cause internal effects, don't they?
No, absolutely. You might not be sending energy back to the sun, but your body is definitely reacting. It's making vitamin D. Maybe you feel warmer, relaxed. That external energy triggers internal processes.
So the exposure itself kicks off internal interaction.
Precisely. And there's another example the sources use that's quite powerful. Just witnessing something negative, like seeing someone misbehave or act unfairly. Even if you don't step in, you're exposed to that. Well, you could call it negative energy. And that exposure can genuinely affect your own thoughts, your feelings.
And maybe even lead to action later on, like deciding to report it or something.
Exactly that. So that passive reception isn't really passive in its consequences. It can absolutely shape future actions and interactions.
Which naturally brings us to thinking about living organisms and energy. It feels pretty intuitive, right? Survival depends on getting and using energy effectively.
It's fundamental, which then raises a really quite profound question the sources touch on. How do organisms without what we'd call a complex brain know how to manage energy?
You mean like viruses?
Yeah.
Or plants?
Yeah, exactly. Viruses are incredible energy hijackers using the host cell's machinery, and there's growing evidence plants can, sense threats, communicate chemically with each other.
That's a form of energy exchange too, isn't it? Chemical signals, material energy.
It is. And it really challenges our assumptions, doesn't it? We tend to think intelligence, agency, that's a human thing.
Yeah, we privilege our own kind of smarts.
But the material sort of probes that. Is that view too narrow? Is attributing agency only to humans maybe missing something fundamental about how life operates and interacts with energy? It's an ongoing scientific debate, of course.
Food for thought, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. The sources also categorize the types of energy, not just the flow.
Right. They break it down into 3 main categories. First, material energy.
That's the physical stuff, things we can touch, sense, use, food, fuel, objects.
Exactly. Tangible resources. And there's cognitive energy.
Mental energy, like focus, knowledge, skills, the stuff we use to think and do.
Precisely. Your mental bandwidth, your ability to process information. And the third one is affective energy.
Emotions, feelings.
Yes, the energy of feelings, emotions, things we experience internally, sometimes very intensely.
Okay, let's try and pin those down. Material. I can sense it, I can use it directly. Like this microphone is material energy.
Right. Cognitive, I'm using it right now to talk about this, to understand, but I can't, physically hold my understanding.
And affective, that's maybe the feeling of interest or frustration if we weren't clear. It's felt, but not directly usable in the same way.
You've got it. You feel it. It influences you powerfully, but you can't directly convert, say, happiness into typing speed. Not directly, anyway.
The sources used a good example, I thought. Your desk, your computer, that's material energy in your workspace.
Yep.
How you feel sitting there stressed, motivated, bored,
Yeah.
that's effective,
Mm-hmm.
and the actual thinking, planning, problem-solving you do, that's cognitive energy being used.
That's a great way to visualize it. And what's really key is how material and cognitive energy work together. The sources call this the usable energy state, UES.
Usable energy state. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the pool we can actually draw from.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
And this UES isn't just one block, it has components. There's activated energy, what you're using right now in the moment.
Like me talking, you listening.
Right. Then there's passive energy. This is more like background processes, maintenance defense systems ready to go.
Like your immune system just ticking over.
Perfect analogy. And finally, reserved energy. This is the stuff stored for future use, for bigger demands, like fat reserves in the body or maybe savings in the bank.
Okay, activated, passive, reserved. That makes sense for a person. Does it apply elsewhere?
Oh, definitely. Think of a business. Activated energy is employees working on current projects. Passive energy might be their IT security systems, their legal retainers, things ready for defense or maintenance.
And reserved energy would be their cash reserves, their strategic inventory.
Exactly. It's a framework that applies across different unities.
But this UES, this usable energy,
Right.
it doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? You mentioned affective energy. How does that fit in?
Crucially, the sources stress this constant interplay. Your UES, material and cognitive, is deeply influenced by your affective state and vice versa.
So if I get sick, that's a hit to my material energy.
Right. And it almost certainly impacts your ability to think clearly, cognitive, and how you feel effective. You might feel down, unable to focus.
And the other way around. If I get really good news,
Big surge of positive affective energy, maybe, that can absolutely boost your cognitive function, make you feel physically energized, ready to take action, which then uses material energy. It's a dynamic loop.
a constant feedback cycle.
Yeah.
Interesting. So how do the sources sort of sum all this up? Is there an overall picture?
There is. They talk about the overall energy state, or OES. Think of it as the combination of your usable energy state, the material and cognitive resources you have available, and your effective energy balance, basically your overall emotional state.
So my usable potential plus my emotional state equals my overall state.
In simple terms, yes. And the implication is that your effective balance, your emotions, significantly shape how you actually deploy that usable energy. Affection, in a broad sense, drives action.
Okay. Now, the sources also looked ahead, didn't they? Something about anticipating future energy?
Yes, anticipated energy exchange, ANEE for short. This is all about potential future gains or losses, primarily of material and cognitive energy.
Like investing money. You use material energy now,
Yeah.
hoping for more material energy later.
Exactly. And the sources introduce this term, trusted energy representing exchange units, or TERRAS. Money is the classic example. It represents potential access to future energy resources.
Okay, so investing a terrace is an act based on ANEE anticipating a future energy gain.
Precisely. And this connects directly to how we think about risk.
How so?
Well, risk assessment, according to this framework, is essentially trying to predict the impact of these anticipated exchanges on your future overall energy state and your usable energy state.
Ah, I see. So if I take this risk, invest this Turiyu, how might it affect my reserves? What's the potential upside versus the potential depletion of my current energy state?
You've got it. It reframes risk in terms of energy dynamics.
Okay, so let's try and pull these threads together.
Yeah.
What are the big takeaways from this deep dive into energy?
Well, first, I'd say it's just how central energy is, but in a much broader way than we might usually think. It's key to understanding behavior, professional life, everything.
And second, the human energy dynamics are particularly complex, involving this interplay between the physical, the mental, and the emotional.
Definitely. Third, the energy we can actually use at any given moment, that UES, is finite and really depends on the context of the situation. Managing it is crucial.
Which leads to the fourth point, maybe. The importance of anticipating future needs. Thinking ahead about energy requirements, ANEE, and risk.
Absolutely. And finally, a really important point for interacting with others, recognizing that everyone's energy state, their OES, their UES, their effective balance varies. It fluctuates. Acknowledging that is vital for creating fair, supportive, equitable environments.
That's a powerful set of reflections. It really shifts perspective.
It does, doesn't it?
So, maybe a final thought for everyone listening. We've talked a lot about anticipated energy exchange, ANEE, those future gains and losses we calculate, often around material things like money or cognitive things like learning a new skill. But maybe consider this. How often do we consciously think about the unseen energy exchanges in our daily interactions? The subtle shifts in effective energy, the small cognitive boosts or drains from conversations. What hidden energy currents, both positive and negative, might be shaping your future OES in ways you haven't fully considered yet? Something to chew on, perhaps.